And because we are in Poland, of course, we would like to see how many people in the room are actually from Poland. Can you raise your hand if you're from Poland? That's quite a lot of people. And are there any people from outside Europe? I know there is one. Are there any people from the Netherlands? From Germany? France? Have I missed anyone? Where are you from? Luxembourg? From Bulgaria? Interesting. Austria? Sorry? Ukraine. Okay. Italy. Ah, that's nice. Okay. We have a very mixed crowd of people. Belgium. Okay. Also Belgium. Well, it's good to see we have a very mixed group of people. I think everybody is in one way or another involved with rail in Poland. And to see what is exactly going on at the moment, the current situation and the current bottlenecks, I would like to start with a presentation from a senior official. We've invited someone from the Office of Rail Transportation in Poland, Michal Jaworski.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Michal Jaworski. I represent Office of Rail Transport in Poland. It is a pleasure for me to be here today on the RailFreight Summit in Poznań. I would like to show you my presentation about the current situation of the intermodal market, the perspectives, and some statistical data. Okay. Sorry. All right. It's too fast. Okay. I will try to do it like this. Well, a few words about us. I represent Office of Rail Transport in Poland. Office of Rail Transport, Urząd Transportu Kolejowego is a Polish central public administration body. We are responsible for the market regulation in Poland. We are the National Safety Authority, and we are supervising the compliance of passenger rights. I represent the Market Regulation Department. I am head of Market Analysis and Market Monitoring Unit. What we do everything about the rail statistics in Poland. We are collecting data from the rail entities, from the market players, preparing reports and statistics and publish them on our website. Considering the role of Poland in the intermodal transport, bearing in mind that the flow of containers is growing year by year, we have to look closer at the role of Poland in the flow in the intermodal transport. Poland is an important country. On one hand, we are the recipient of the goods of containers from the Far East. On the other hand, we are the exporter of goods. And looking at the location of Poland at the map of Europe, we can see Poland is located at the land railroad from the Far East to Europe, such called the New Silk Road, and many trains are crossing our country in transit. So we are the transit country, we are the recipient of goods, and we are the exporter. Again, okay. Let's look closer, let's focus on the transit role of Poland. In 2018, we recognized 8,200 intermodal trains crossing Poland in transit. 61% of these trains were the trains on the New Silk Road, mainly crossing Poland from east to west, from the Terespol-Brześć border crossing on the east to Orzepin-Oderbrücke on the west. The remaining 39% of intermodal transit trains were not on the New Silk Road. There were the trains heading from the automotive factories located in Czech Republic and Slovakia to Russia. So there were intermodal trains with automotive parts. You have to consider also that of all the amount of trains crossing the Polish border at the east, 73% of trains are in transit going to the recipients in the Western Europe, and 27% of the trains remains in Poland at the Polish recipients. When we are talking about the role of intermodal transport in Poland, we have to mention the huge role of the Polish intermodal seaports, the Polish ports, mainly located in Gdańsk and Gdynia. The level of transshipment of containers at the Polish ports reached the level of 3 million in 2019. And the Polish seaports handled the number of 8,900 intermodal trains last year. They were mainly spreading the containers across the country to all the important intermodal terminals in Poland. Only 1% of them crossed our border at the south of Poland to Czech Republic. So mainly the goods which are in containers handled in our seaports are going to the recipients within the country. Again, some statistics about the Polish seaports. As I mentioned, 3 million transshipments last year. The major role of the two seaports located in Gdańsk and in Gdynia. There are also intermodal sea terminals located in Szczecin and Świnoujście, but they have a marginal meaning. The increase of number of transshipments of TEUs is 7% from between 2018 and 2019. The map of the intermodal terminals in Poland, as I mentioned, Gdańsk, Gdynia, Świnoujście, and Szczecin. These are the sea terminals. The terminals located on the borders at east, Siemianówka, Małaszewicze, Żurawica, on north with Russia, Braniewo, and on west at the border with Germany, it's Rzepin. All other inland terminals are located all over Poland, especially in the central of Poland and in southern Poland, mainly around the big cities. Okay, the basic statistics characterizing the intermodal market in Poland. The basic statistics we are analyzing are the number of TEUs transported by rail, the number of intermodal units, the weight of transported goods by containers, and the transport performance. As you can see, since 2010, the number of all these figures were increasing. We are facing a stable, continuous growth, and each year the value achieved beats the value achieved in the previous year. So it looks like this since 2010, since for the last 10 years. We are wondering how would it look like by the end of 2020 regarding the current situation, but I will come back to this question at the end of my presentation. Yes, the same with the same figures with weight and the transport performance. Another interesting value, another interesting statistic which is characterizing the intermodal market in Poland is the share of intermodal transport in all rail freight transport. So by weight, it is 8.3% in 2019, and the share of transport performance of intermodal transport is 12.6% of the whole transport performance made by the freight trains in Poland. A part of the statistical indicators, we are also analyzing the market players. On the right, you can see a graph with the main market players at the intermodal market. As you probably know, in Poland, there are over 70 entities, railway undertakings that are carrying the rail freight, and among of them 20 are rendering services in intermodal transport. The biggest market share regarding the weight of transported goods have the PKP Cargo. PKP Cargo is an incumbent company, state-owned. It has a share of 44%. The remaining 56% belongs to the other smaller entities, smaller railway undertakings. But looking at this, a few years, the PKP Cargo is the share of PKP Cargo is decreasing. They used to have 50% of market. Now it's 44%. Another interesting statistics is the type of containers, the type of intermodal units that are carried by trains in Poland. The most popular types of containers are 20-feet containers and 40-feet containers. The remaining 10% of the types of intermodal units belong to other types of containers, and unfortunately to trailers and semi-trailers connected to the subject of today's conference. It is only 1.6%. Speed of intermodal trains in Poland. We are also analyzing this figure. You have to consider that the average speed of the intermodal trains is higher than the conventional freight train. The average speed of intermodal trains in 2019 was 31.7 kilometers per hour, and the average speed of the conventional freight train was 25.5 kilometers per hour. And on the right, on the graph, you can see the selected intermodal routes of trains and the speeds of trains. So the speediest intermodal connection is between Rzepin, Oderbrucke border crossing with Germany to the intermodal terminal at Gątki near Poznań. It is 62 kilometers per hour. Okay, and now about the current situation, the impact of COVID-19. Here on the graph you can see the statistics. Those data are not from us. We took them from the website containerstatistics.com, and they show the number of TEUs transported in the world monthly. As you can see, till January 2020, the situation remained stable. Between the 14 and 15 million TEUs per month. Then in February 2020 there was a drop where the factories in China stopped working. There was a huge decrease of the market. Then it was slightly increased. Right now the situation is stabilized between 13 and 14 millions of TEU transported per month. The latest data we have are from June 2020. How does it look like in Poland, the situation regarding COVID and this year? Well, we have compared the first half year of 2019 with the first half year of 2020. And what we can see about the basic parameters. Regarding the number of transported TEUs, you can see the increase of 16.2%. Regarding the number of intermodal units, again, increase of 12.6%. And the other two parameters, the weight of transported goods and transport performance, also increased by in the first half year of 2020 comparing to first half year of 19 by 17.3%, and the transport performance increased by 4.6%. So this doesn't look so bad. The impact of COVID so far is not destroying the figures that we achieved in the last years. We'll see what will happen in the second part of the year. Another additional statistic is the number of intermodal trains. Again, 21,000 intermodal trains in the first half of 2019 and 27,000 intermodal trains more in the first half of 2020, so increase of 26%. And forecasts of intermodal market, well, we don't do the forecasts. We are only collecting data and publishing data. The scientists are doing the forecasts. Here are the forecasts taken from the analysis of potential of development of rail container transport market in Poland report elaborated by Professor Jana Pieriegud. And we can see the level of transshipment on the border terminals at the level of 141,000 in 2016, and forecasted increase in 2027 by 742,000 TEUs. The compound aggregated growth rate at the level of 16.3%, and the level of transshipment in the Polish seaports is really huge. 2.4, almost 2.4 million at 2017, up to 8.6 million at 2028, with the compound annual growth rate at the level of 12.4. In the meantime, in 19 we had 3 million transshipment of TEUs, so we are on the way to achieve it. And summarizing for future and the what should be done to keep up this development of intermodal transport in Poland. Here are the findings. Of course, Poland should keep implementing the transport policies and strategies of European Union and policies and strategies of Poland, which are foreseeing the putting pressure on development of intermodal transport. Keep the level of the investments to achieve optimal conditions for the entire rail system, railway lines, intermodal terminals, rolling stock, IT solutions. Regarding the railway lines, there are particularly some parameters that we would like to achieve, that should be achieved for the intermodal trains. This is the load axle at the level of 22.5 tons per axle, the length of 740 meters of the train, with the speed at the level of 100 kilometers per hour. Of course, the capacity needs to be improved at the east-west corridor and north-south corridor, especially the bottlenecks on the border crossing should be eliminated. Another point is implementation of modern transport technologies, of course, to transport the trailers and semi-trailers, and to increase the share of this type of units, to take them to shift them from the roads, and popularization of containerization and containers as in market as a load unit for in trade. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be here today and tomorrow if you have any questions, or we can discuss or share the doubts. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Yes, and Michal will be on stage for questions from the audience as well in a bit. But first, we will talk to Jana Pieriegud. You were already introduced by Michal, and I do it now again. Please welcome on the stage.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me well? Yeah, it's fine. Okay, great. So I'm very happy to be here today, be part of this very interesting event and very interesting topic. RailFreight has been subject of my professional interest and a number of analyses as long as I remember. And today I would like to show you the situation on the Polish freight transport, both for road and rail. I will not take into account the inland waterways, whose share in Poland is marginal, less than 1%. So I will focus on rail, but also on road transport. To fully understand the situation on freight market and the current situation and the prospects, it is crucial to consider the major factors that influence the freight transport and modal split. First, geographical location and natural condition, as it was mentioned for my for previous presenters. So it's quite important. Second, macroeconomic indicators like GDP. Third, foreign trade turnover of goods, volume split by commodities and by main trade factors, but also involvement of a given country in a global value chain become more and more important, and I will very briefly explain it a bit later. Next factor, of course, development of transport infrastructure, and finally, regulations. Coming back to our first factor, the location. The benefits in the case of Poland include its Central European location with a perfect condition for transit. It was already mentioned today, as well as the access to the sea. What's more, two neighboring countries are landlocked without own seaports, and another three seaports. And another three landlocked country are located within 500 kilometers. Also, Poland is located on the shortest and the most cost-effective route from Europe to China, and from China and Europe. But at the same time, some advantages sometimes are disadvantages. For example, the proximity of Germany, one of the major world's economy and the main Poland's trade partner, especially with the seaport of Hamburg, and also with the world's biggest inland waterway port, Duisburg, which handled last year up to 40 container trains every week with different destinations in China, and also location of other major European seaports within 750 kilometers from Poland. Advantages or disadvantages? What do you think? Now, macroeconomic factors, GDP growth. The economy of Poland, with 40 million people and about $566 billion of GDP, is the sixth largest in the European Union. As you can see, Poland had uninterrupted economic growth between 2000 and 2019, resulting in a threefold increase in GDP. At the same time, the GDP per capita at purchasing power parity, reaching almost 34,000 international dollars. However, Poland steadily catching up with Western Europe. The high dynamics of foreign trade of goods was also fostered freight transport market. Looking at the export partners, we can see that the top 5 are from the European Union in case of export. But in case of import, last year, China became the second biggest partner with 12% share in the total amount of import. This change is very important for future. Besides that, we must remember about the trade in value-added approach. These graphs show economies with the highest level of domestic value chain in global value activities. This approach allows to move from this traditional trade volumes to the quantable interdependency of different industry in different economies. So why this is very important? By the way, this approach helps us to understand this impact of COVID to economies and to also freight transport. In terms of infrastructure investment, Poland has been the biggest beneficiary of the EU funds since 2007 to develop the transport infrastructure, the national road construction program and the national rail program were launched in 2008 and 2010 respectively. There are two important things to underline here. First, you can see on the graph the difference in funds to road and to rail infrastructure. The investments to road infrastructure was 3 times higher than to rail. Second, in case of a road network, a new network was planned, and as end of last year, about 4,100 kilometers of expressways and highways already built in Poland. In case first. Okay, fine. In the case of railways, the existing network has been upgraded. We can note a number of positive effects in this case. One of them is a better condition of railway network. For example, the increase is from 25% in year 2004 to more than 60% in year 2019. Also a positive effect we can see in the axle load, 22.5 tons. Here this growth is from about 40% to 60%. However, the share of trucks with maximum speed less than 80 km per hour remains almost the same. What's more, time-tailed speed, it was also already mentioned today, for freight transport, for freight trains, remains 25 kilometers per hour. Unbelievable. After 12 years of really big investments. Now, what we can learn from the long-term trends in freight transport. The rail freight transport performance has fluctuated significantly between 2000 and 2019. With maximum 2 years ago and minimum in 2009. But a shocking thing is that in last year we came back to the volume of the year 2000. It means no growth was achieved within last 20 years. A comparison with a long term in road transport helps us to understand this situation. Between 2000 and 2019, we can see about 5.3-fold increase in road transport performance. As a result, share of rail in freight market has decreased from 42% to 12%. This is a huge fall, as you can see. Okay, before I move on, I'd like to sum up this part. On the one hand, at the last 20 years, we have had a very good economic conditions for transport demand. Investments for rail infrastructure has increased significantly, manifold. Competition in railway market is allowed. We have many newcomers on our market. But on the other hand, the share of rail freight in the whole transport market decreased. So what's next? In the next 10 years, we can expect worse economic conditions, the economic downturn in world economy, in Europe, and in Poland. Also, important factor is reconfiguration of supply chain and change of national added value in global value chain, especially in case of relocation of production to Europe. Further implementation of infrastructure development programs and new investment projects probably will start. One of them, the most ambitious, as you know, is Central Communication Port with new railway lines. However, we don't know how many railway lines and in which direction will be built until 2030. Last but not least, implementation of the EU mobility package and decrease of drivers' cost in international road transport give some chances for rail freight in the future. What changes in modal split can we expect in the next decades? I would like to show you 3 scenarios. Let's look at the first one. In case if current trend continues, the share of rail freight in the whole market will decrease from current 12 to 9%. Unfortunately. But as we know, fortunately or unfortunately, the future is almost never is a continuation of the previous trends. So we can calculate more positive scenarios. Let's see what it looks like for keeping the current 12 share of rail. If GDP rise at average 2% annually by 2030, and freight transport performance 3.8% year to year, the total freight transport performance will be about 680 billion ton kilometers. It means that to keep this 12% of rail, we need to reach the rail freight performance at level about 80 billion tonne kilometers. 2.5 times more than today. Also, this volume is comparable to 1990 in Poland, and we need to remember that we have only 10 years for this growth. The segment that promises a great growth potential, it was presented and in the previous presentation, is combined rail-road transport. So just a few comparisons with the neighboring countries and some also prospects for Poland. Between 2004 and 2019, Poland, compared to neighboring countries, recorded highest 7.3-fold increase in rail container transport, reaching more than 2 million TEU, and ahead the Czech Republic. However, this volume is still 3.5 times less than in Germany. I estimate the possibility of growth of this segment in Poland to 3 million TEU by 2030. Again, we need to remember this segment is about 10% of the rail freight market in Poland. In the third scenario, to achieve an increase at rail share to 20%, rails should transport about 140 billion tonne kilometers. It means maximum level that has ever been transported by rails in Poland. It happened in 1978. This is also more than rails carried out today in Germany. And this raises a number of crucial questions for me. For example, will the network today, rail network, with mixed traffic, freight and passenger, can be ready to compound this growth? The next question is, what regulation are necessary for this? And one very important question, do we need a totally new approach for freight transport development in Poland? So, finally, do you really think that it will work for shift from road to rail in Poland? This is questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jana. A very good question. And I would like to invite you on stage as well, because we have a chance to ask some questions from the audience. Does anyone already have a burning question for these two people who have excellent knowledge about the intermodal transport market in Poland? What I found very surprising is the statistics that you shared, actually, that there was 3 times as much spent on rail than on road. Is that something, why is that? Do you think you could explain that? You, Michal? Oh, sorry, the mic.
The road transport in Poland 30 years ago was very poor developed. So, in my opinion, there was a need to finally build the beautiful roads and motorways in Poland, and that's why this need was was completed. And another thing is that building a new motorway is easier than modernization of existing railroad, because when there is an existing railroad, you have to put it off from the operations, put the trains other way, and it generates a lot of problems. And when building a new road in completely green field, it's easier because the cars and the road traffic uses the existing roads, and the new road is finally completed, and the cars and the road transport is starting using it. So it was easier to build new roads, to start with building new roads, with fixing the rails. And 30 years ago, a lot of rail lines were closed. It was closing and switching and demolishing. So probably it is why there were so much funds spent on the roads than on the railway lines.
And is that something of the past now? Because you said there was, so is that done, and do we have a completely different mindset now?
I hope so. There are plans for the new programming period of the EU funds to put, I don't remember the figures exactly, but I think more than in the previous years on the rail construction and fixing the rail modernization.
Yes, and as a UTK, do you have any influence on this transport policy?
Actually, we are not a governmental body. As I said, we are the central public administration. Our role is rather regulation of the rail market and safety on the railroads. But what we can do, we can cooperate with the ministry. The Ministry of Infrastructure creates the politics in this area in Poland, so we can continuously put a pressure on them, show them the solutions, show them how it should look like, and talk with them. Unfortunately, we don't have the power to change the politics and the spread of the funds.
Yeah. And Jana, it seemed to me that you're quite pessimistic about the future. Is that true? Do you think it's not possible to make a significant change?
So this is very difficult questions about modal shift from road to rail. So of course, I would like to see the growth in rail transport. However, I also try to be try to
realistic.
Really, yeah. Thank you very much. Realistic, and as an independent expert, try to have this quite wide view on different things, and to analyze it independently sometimes, but sometimes, of course, to look both on different trends or some things. It helps, as I presented, to understand better the situation. When we would like to say we are going to increase the share of rail by X%. Yeah, and just the aim of my analysis and presentation is just please look to the figures, yeah, and try to calculate, and you will see it is very difficult today, and so we really need to rethink over the transport policy.
Okay. Any suggestions or questions from the audience? Please go ahead, Sanne. We have the long mic coming your way.
Yeah, I know that we're here to talk about making the model shift from road to rail, but I also hear quite credible signals that, for example, like looking at the future, options like the Hyperloop might become relevant or even realistic. How does that innovation factor in your scenarios? Is there any place for them?
So you're right, of course. We should look at some new technologies and innovations for rail transport. But the major disadvantages of this are huge costs. Even when we talk about to transport swept bodies or trucks by rail, and this idea Tyrynatory in Poland. So fine, great, but who will pay it for this? Yeah, and we need more than 10 years this period for economic effectively to use it. So this is a point. In case of new technology like a Hyperloop or some other, or about to build new rail tracks, of course, we need it to look at it and to analyze. However, again, for next 10 years in Poland, about next 3,000 of roads will be built, of new roads. For rails, we need about 7 to 10 billion zloty. That's about 2,500 billion euro every year to invest to rail infrastructure, but just to the existing rail infrastructure. The central communication port, I don't know. We still don't know about it. And as we all know, the economic conditions for investment, it's quite difficult today to talk about it.
Thank you very much. There was a question back there.
Hi, yeah. I mean, one thing neither of you really touched upon was the products that are being carried by rail. So one of the issues is that currently there's a lot of coal, for example, being carried by rail, while what you're actually trying to achieve is a product shift from a modal shift from containers from road to rail. And I wonder if you've looked into your numbers to see maybe part of that market decline is because some of those products that are being carried by rail are going to decline over the coming years, but actually underneath it there is an intermodal shift going on for containers to come off-road and onto rail, and those volumes should be going up and rail should be capturing market share. Have you considered that in looking at both your historical numbers but also your future forecasts, looking at that product change that might go on?
The main problem, what I see in this case, if we would like to move some trucks to rails, trucks to trucks, is that someone need to look for export and import flows to find this amount to develop some connections, few times a week, for example, for this, to be costly effectiveness. I think this is the main problem. Who will look for this? We have there also on this meeting companies, forwarding companies, logistics companies, and other. They are looking for cargo. Yeah, it's for these possibilities to launch new connections, for example. But my feelings is that in a real situation is that this is very difficult to really realize this idea. So.
Okay. I think this gives us a bit of a good background to further discuss the possibilities in Poland. You will be back for the debate on stage, but before we start that, I'd like to thank you very much for joining and invite the next speaker, Roland Verbraak. We already mentioned it, the borders in Poland have a great potential to help the shift to rail, and Roland knows all about it because he's specialized in rail transport from the Netherlands to Poland. So Roland Verbraak, welcome.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Roland Verbraak of GVT Group of Logistics. And we are a family company, and I represent here one of our 3 companies in our group. And that's GVT Intermodal Freight BV. That's the company who runs trains between Zeppin and Tilburg in the Netherlands. And next to that, they also operate, together with RTSB and Chengdu, also trains to China. And we have our own company in China, and we have our own terminal in Tilburg, and we have our own terminal in Zeppin. Where we believe in is always in finding solutions. We are not a company who looks for problems. We always try to find solutions that everything is going faster and quicker and according to set targets. Yeah, we are an Oh, here it changed there or not? Okay. We are an intermodal company, and we have been first a family company with only road transport, and we believed in intermodal change. And that's why we shifted to intermodal transport. So we have now our own rail company since last year to do our own shunting. We have our own wagon sets, we have our own barges in the Netherlands, and we have our own barge terminals in Tilburg and in Weert. We have our own rail terminals in Tilburg, Zeppin. And for Benelux distribution, we have our own 5 strategic hubs. And we are specialized in FCL, LCL, and warehousing, also 170,000 square meters of warehouse. Yeah, they asked me to tell something about the crossing of the borders east-west. Goes back every time. Oh, I see. Sorry. I was asked to tell something about the changes and the challenges in the border with Germany and about the North Sea Baltic corridor, and also the problems we are having at the increases of the volumes on the borders. Working improvements on the borders. We have some ideas about it as a company, but we cannot do that alone. We need also the government and other people to help us to achieve this. The other items also is in Holland we achieved a task force, and we hope that also here in Poland we will achieve a task force to achieve those bottlenecks and not only talk about problems but talk about solutions. Yeah, this is then the TNT network. So this is the network from east to west in which we believed in and we have invested in. And that's why we built that or rented that terminal now in Zeppin, and that's close to the German-Polish border. And that's also a growing economic area. And that has to do because a lot of Chinese companies are establishing companies there. And that's due to the fact that they have the good system in Poland for customs, and they have the good distribution networks of products in Germany. Where we believe in is in point-point connections. And that's why we achieved the connection from Zeppin to Tilburg only in 12 hours. 12 hours. So that means that's faster than truck, because a truck has to have a rest of 9 hours. So what we do from Zeppin to Tilburg is we transport a lot of trailers, containers, and nowadays also trailers who have not a hoekenpak system. So we believe in that solution to find more and more reasons to use the train. Currently we have 3 to 4 trains a week from Tilburg to Zeppin, vice versa. And we want to achieve this year 6 times a week. What is also increasing is the volumes from China towards Europe. And what you can see here is that it's not only caused by the economy which is growing, but it also has to do with the circumstances of air freight. Air freight is dropping very rapidly because there used to be a lot of freight in the bellies of the planes for persons. That is skipped now. There are no personal flights anymore to China at the moment. So what you see more and more are that there are cargo going by rail because it's a cheap solution compared with air freight also. So what is happening now? There are more and more trains going from China to Europe. As you can see here, it's a number of the Chinese rail companies. It has increased with 68%. So it's a lot of volume which is coming by rail now from China. Yeah, this is causing a lot of bottlenecks in Mala and also at the border in Frankfurt-Oder. And that's why we want to find a solution for Frankfurt-Oder, because that's a little bit our territory. Also, other companies find solutions to solve this problem. Maybe RTSB can explain, but RTSB also finds another solution for this rail connection. So they go to Kaliningrad. The advantage of that is that you go from China to Kaliningrad with bigger trains. You don't have to change the tracks. And from Kaliningrad there is now short sea solutions to Hamburg. So everybody is finding a way to solve the problems at the borders by finding new ways. Yeah, is this a threat for Poland, or is it an advantage that they need less cargo on the rail? Yeah, what I also found strange, what I heard just now, is that we invested as a EU a lot of money in Poland, and the trains are still running just as fast. So I was wondering, where has the investment gone to? Is that only in improving the current, but not improving in speed? So I think, we believe in setting up more and more intermodal. And we believe also in intermodal between Poland and the Netherlands. Yeah, what is happening? The solution, I think, and we as a company believe in, is to create longer trains of 740 meters. And that's also the new trend in TEN-T modules. So what we examined is also that in Zeppin and in Holland, there are also the possibilities already for 740 meters trains. And it's not an unusual length. For instance, in China, you have trains of 3.2 kilometers length. In France, you have trains for more than 750 meters length. And yeah, we are still struggling to go from 600 to 740 meters. And I think if we don't achieve the 740 meters in the short term, we have a problem to do the model shift like we want. Because the fuel is cheaper, the trucks are cheaper, and you have more and more competition by the trucks. For instance, in the Netherlands, it's now already allowed to run with 32-meter trucks. That starts in September. And if that comes common in Europe, then the trains should also be longer. So I believe in to have longer trains as quick as possible and find solutions to realize it. The other item is that sometimes at the borders, the tracks are personal, transport is more important than cargo transport. So what happens is that the long tracks, they go to the personal trains, which only have 200 meters length, and the cargo trains go to tracks which are shorter. So we must plan and see cargo and trains more and more important. Here you have the tracks of Oderbahnbrücke. Like I said to you, track 1 and 2 is for persons traveling, and the other tracks are for traveling of containers and other cargo trains. So I believe we must try to find solutions to discuss with PKP and other companies to have the long tracks for the cargo and the short tracks for the personnel transport. What everybody requires, he gets. I also believe in to look at points at the border completely different. I will explain in the next sheet. What happens now is that you go to Frankfurt-Oder, you change the log driver, you change the electricity of the train, and so everything is done at Frankfurt-Oder. And I believe in a solution that it's multiple functional border crossing. So what I believe is that each border, you have Seppin, you have Frankfurt-Oder, and you have Frankfurt-Oder Hauptbahnhof, they say. So you must use those 3 stations to get the border crossing more efficient. And how do you get that more efficient? So that the log driver changes who goes from Poland to Germany. The German log driver goes on the train in Seppin. He only goes to Frankfurt-Oder. He changes the electricity and he drives all the way to the Dutch border. If a train comes from Germany to Poland, the Polish driver goes on the train in Frankfurt-Bahnhof and he drives all the way to Potsdam. But that's not possible. And why is that not possible? Because we all stick to our own language. What is happening in a log driver, if he crosses the border, although it's maybe 10 kilometers, you should speak the German language. A German driver should speak the Polish language. So what I propose is that we put on Frankfurt-Oder a controller who speaks 2 languages, and a Polish driver can drive all the way to Frankfurt, and the German driver can drive all the way to Seppin. Then you have suddenly 3 times the capacity we need. Only, that is, I think, a discussion between politics. How can we change that? So I think it's not the operators who have to change something, but it's the politics. They should work more together to create a collaboration at the borders. Also the wagon checks and the brake tests, why should that every time be done if you switch drivers? If you have an understanding with each other, you must trust the Polish driver and you must trust the German driver that they really did the test. Why do the test again? The other item is if you do the crossing at the border, also the less activities, you also have less criminal activities. At the borders you have much more criminal activities in the last months than ever before. So where we believe in is we have Frankfurt-Oder, we have Frankfurt-Oder-Brücke and Seppin, and use all those 3 terminals to create a solution of the traffic jams on the terminals and on the border crossings. And maybe this is also a solution which we can use at the Belarus-Polish border, but I'm not so familiar with that. But maybe in that way you can also increase the capacity and you don't lose your cargo which goes through Poland towards every country in Europe. To explain a little bit further, below the 600-meter trains, 64% of all the trains which are run in Europe are below the 600 meters. 25% is only between the 600 and the 700 meters. And that's doing mostly the intermodal companies, because if you have a train of 740 meters, you can carry 12 containers more. You can carry 6 trailers more. And then you can become competitive towards the road. And if you don't change that to the 700 meters, it will be a difficult target to achieve the model shift. And also 11, between the 700 and 835 meters is only 11%. So we believe in intermodal and we go for it. Where we also see structural growth. So this is Frankfurt-Oder. There's a complete area which still can be used for new tracks. Why don't we invest that money in the new tracks at the borders? And then we have a lot of more capacity. This crossing is very important in the TEN-T network for east-west crossing. There are no buildings in that area. The only challenge is the height difference, so we have to solve that problem at Frankfurt-Oder. And the other solution is to expand in Zeppin. In Zeppin you have a lot of tracks which are not used, but it's not on the crossing. It's only 5 or 7 kilometers further. So if we would cooperate more between the countries, we can achieve a lot. So where do we believe in? We believe in task force. And task force is a cooperation between government, public companies, operators, and everything. So what we have a task force at Bad Bentheim. We have a task force to create 740 meters trains. We also have the task force there to create what I just said, but then Oldenzaal, the border, and Bad Bentheim. And in that sense, you are more flexible, and you know also from each other's problems. So what I propose is, let's find a task force who also will talk about Frankfurt-Oder, between Poland, Germany, and also with these ministries involved. So Ministry of Infrastructure, PKP, PLK, DB Nets and users. And do that every 3 months. We are now also discussing every 3 months. And we see already progress. We see what is the problems between the two countries. How can we solve those issues? And I think that is the solution in getting more model shift. It's working together. In Holland, we also achieved a lot with intermodal, but then not only by rail, but only by barge. We work with terminals together so that we can have bigger ships from one place to the other. So we pass 2 terminals, we reload the cargo, or we combine the cargo, and we have fixed time slots, also in Rotterdam. So I believe in working together, creating teams which matter, and create a real model shift. Because only talking is not the issue. We want action to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can have a seat if you like, so you don't have to go back and forth. Very valid question. So as EU, we are greatly investing in Poland, and yet there is no change in, for example, the speed of trains. Does anyone know an answer to that question? Why is it not changing? It's a very mysterious thing that's happening in Poland. I hope we can find an answer in the debate. But first, before we start with that, we have one last speaker. He is not here physically. He couldn't make it, but he's joining us online. And this is Mr. Dariusz Stefanski from PCC Intermodal.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to everyone. First of all, I would like to apologize for not attending the conference personally. But unfortunately, due to the current pandemic situation and taking into account also the related internal company regulations, everything forced me to cancel my physical participation to this event. So sorry for that, but I do believe that taking into account that the subject I was given to present and discussed with you is very well known and it's as old as the railway, I think it could be done remotely. So what are the bottlenecks and what are the obstacles which effectively delay the development or the quick development of intermodal transport in Poland? We might divide those obstacles into the groups, but the first one I think is well known to all of us, because it is the group of the obstacles which are related to infrastructure or rail infrastructure. This group is very often called the objective factors. Whether they're objective or not, I have my doubts, because objective factors are those who are in fact independent of us and we do not have influence on them. For years I was maybe naive, but I believe that we do have the influence on the rail infrastructure. But after all those years working for intermodal industry, I'm not quite sure anymore. All infrastructure problems have been discussed many times already, and in fact, almost nothing or just only a little has been changed in the meantime. And going even further, I am afraid that not much in this respect will change in the next few years. Because we are talking about the poor quality of the rail infrastructure, and we can talk about that for years, or sorry, for hours. Same about closures and all kinds of the difficulties related to continuous and endless modernization of railway lines. Of course, infrastructure managers are claiming that everything is being improved or is underway to be improved. But if we take on top of that all kinds of the problems which we have to deal in respect of the frequent congestions, problems with the cross-border traffic, it is both at the Polish-Belarusian border or even the Polish-German border, there is no really the light in the tunnel. This is not the secret that the passenger transport is always given the priority, while the rail freight transport belongs to, locally we called it, fourth category of snow removal. Maybe not everyone remember that, but when we had the strong and the snowy winter time in Poland, then each city, each region, or even each street were assigned with so-called the snow removal category. The lower category was the faster snow was removed. So that time everyone wanted to belong to the first category. The fourth category meant more or less that no one should expect any snow removal and snow will simply disappear naturally in the springtime. I really do not know whether the problems with railway infrastructure can be compared to the problems with the snow. But sometimes I have the impression that many people still are hoping that all those problems will disappear by themselves like snow in the spring. So I think this is also the time to make it quite clear to everyone that those problems, infrastructure problems, will not be solved by themselves. We have to be really pushing on the one side and also to really invest a lot of time and money into the infrastructure to make sure that we have really the right railway infrastructure to be able to offer the modern solution for such a transport like intermodal. Also, the idea, which was discussed a couple of times already, about the longer trains, 740, it's just an actual dream of the intermodal industry. We know all about the idea, but in fact, question is if and when this idea might be realized. The truth is that at present, on most of the railway routes, we are able to operate 600-meter trains, and none of the roads is prepared for 740, at least not in Poland. Another point is about the commercial speed of intermodal trains, or all the freight trains. As we all know, here in Poland right now we are talking about the average speed, which is still below 30 kilometers per hour. So listen to what I am trying to say is that we are talking only about problems, and problems. But despite all those problems and all those obstacles, I don't want to sound pessimistic. I think that's a lot of optimism around. The biggest optimistic factor is that we are the leader in one matter, and I think we could be proud of that. In Poland, we have one of the highest access rates to the railway infrastructure in Europe. So, in fact, we have a railway infrastructure on which our trains run twice slower than in Germany or in Netherlands, but at the same time we can pay for it two times more than our colleagues in Germany or in Netherlands. Is it that great? I think this. But seriously now, I do believe that there might be a quite simple and also quite obvious solution. Maybe this is the really time to make the access rates to the railway infrastructure dependent on the offered and guaranteed average commercial speed of the train. I think that sooner or later, I do believe sooner, we have to start treat the railway infrastructure or railway transport exactly the same way like the road transport. What does it mean and how we could implement such a solution? Just if we could imagine that standard access rates to railway infrastructure would be adjusted to the level of the road infrastructure access rates. For, let's say, the speed, average commercial speed between 50 and 70 kilometers per hour, so exactly the same like the trucks on the average are going on the roads. Then I think that everyone would really be ready to accept the higher or the premium rates to be charged by infrastructure manager, similar like the truck goes to the highway, if the average commercial speed would be over 70 kilometers per hour. If, however, the speed would be from the range of 40-50 kilometers per hour, then I would expect any kind of the lower or discounted rate to apply. And finally, if the average commercial speed will be below 40 kilometers per hour, then I would expect that such access to the infrastructure would be for free. With such a solution, I think that finally we will also get the infrastructure manager on the hook, or the infrastructure manager who will be really interested and motivated to improve the efficiency and to offer the highest possible commercial speed to the trains. Because currently, I have a feeling that only the railway undertakings are interested in improving efficiency and to drive train faster, while from the infrastructure manager perspective, it really doesn't matter whether what kind of speed he's offering, because in fact he receives the same payment regardless whether he offers average commercial speed of 20 or 60 kilometers per hour. I guess that we have to lead in this direction, and we should really implement some sort of the new rules. And it's time to change the relation between the infrastructure manager and the railway undertakings. And almost at the end, to conclude the topic of existing barriers holding back the development of intermodal transport in Poland, especially on the north-south corridor, it is of course impossible not to mention about the local, not even the barrier, it's barricade built by DCT Gdańsk, our largest sea terminal. This is of course about famous manipulation fee. I don't want to talk about it, but I really wonder what would be the reaction of the rail logistic industry and also the state administration if any of the sea terminals in Port of Rotterdam, Antwerp or Hamburg would require from intermodal operators to pay an additional fee for the fact that the containers are delivered or picked up from the terminal by rail and not by road. So maybe it is worth to conducting an industrial survey in those countries, and if everyone would be enthusiastically supporting the DCT idea, then the manipulation fee could be also implemented by all other terminals in Rotterdam, Hamburg and Antwerp. I am quite convinced that if there will be a lot of interest in this solution, then DCT will share their business model with all those terminals for a reasonable license fee. That's of course sounds like a joke, but we are really having a serious problem here locally with this manipulation fee, and I do believe that this must be sorted out and finally closed somehow in the nearest future. That's all from my side, and I wish you a fruitful discussion in Poznań, and from my side, of course, stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Stefanski is available for the debate we're going to have. He is online. Thank you very much. There you are, live and kicking. Okay, so this is the moment where we're all going to use our phones for the Mentimeter. And I would like to ask Jana and Michal to join us on stage, so you can also join for the debate if you'd like. We have the long camera there. So let's first start with the first question. It's a yes or no question. We have seen that not much has changed in the last 12 years when it comes to the share of rail, but is there something that maybe has improved compared to last year? And then we would like to take you back to our last conference. If you were there in May last year, we discussed a lot of bottlenecks as well. Has anything improved compared to the situation last year? Or if you were not there, maybe something else comes to your mind. You can say yes or no. Okay, that's not quite as pessimistic as I would expect. There are a lot of people who answered yes. Can I ask everybody who said yes to raise his or her hand? And then there is 32%, 29%, so I know that a lot of people said yes. Internet. Mistakes, okay.
Mistakes.
What have you answered?
Actually, I answered no, because to my understanding, okay, there are some changes in terms of operation on some railway terminals, especially I'm talking about Małaszewicze. But to be honest, recently we've seen a lot of cancellation of trains because of the trains, westbound trains going from Małaszewicze to Duisburg, just because very long queue of containers waiting in Brześć going to Poland. So the answer is, of course, to do the tracking, yeah? And the market is nowadays booming in terms of tracking from Małaszewicze to different destinations. But this is not the answer, right? The answer should be to do it by rail. So this is particularly why I answered no.
Yes. So actually, and at the other side of the border, there are still a lot of improvements needed. Okay. Anybody else who said no? Please go ahead.
Yeah, last year when we met in Gdansk, we saw that the key problems were located in the infrastructure. And now on top, I see that still we didn't overcome the language problem at the border. That's a step back even.
All right.
Step back.
At the Polish border, the driver will not be required to recite Pantadeusz because the railway language is very short and specific. So why don't we invent a railway Esperanto for everyone?
Or language maybe called English? Yeah.
Now, I know that the border was an issue even 2 years back, and then when we met last year, a lot of people said, well, things have improved a little bit. It got a little bit better, didn't it? Or does everybody disagree with this? There's a lot of people who said that some improvements were done. Where are you, positive people?
Now, let me see some positivity. There should be positivity in the audience.
Roland?
Yeah, there is a little bit progress. So we are discussing now also more with the Polish ministry, and that has improved a lot. But we also invested as a company a lot in new methods, and that's creating fixed paths. So we have now for our trains fixed paths, so they have the same legal identity as a personal train, but it costs money, a lot of money for companies like us to run those trains because you have to have reserved a complete track. And if you would not need that, then it would be much more easy to run very sufficient cargo trains because of the fixed tracks, but they cost a lot of money.
Yes.
It's already on.
That's on. Okay. We also saw that there are a lot of projects actually carried out, and this takes a lot of time. So people generally say that yes, improvements will come, but they will take time, and that's a logical step. But surely there are things that can be done in the short term. So I would like to ask you all to think with us which short-term solutions could be applied. Now, you don't have to write this down, but let's have a little bit of a brainstorming session. Oh no, maybe you can
Yeah, I will be
pick
walking
something.
around the moment I see somebody idea. And probably, I mean, these can be the small increments. We're not talking large-scale infrastructure investments. It's exactly also as Roland says, you need to have better procedures, etc. And these are the things that can maybe make a difference in the short run. So, were there any ideas you've not yet heard in one of the presentations as a suggestion?
Yeah, what I would say is also said it also. Okay.
Yeah.
You said it, what also should be needed is maybe the way of communication. A lot of communication is also difficult because it's not all shared communication. So the rail operator in Poland gives the information to the Frankfurt owner and the German gives it, but they should communicate more together that they really know which train is coming when and how we can use the capacity. I heard that the real capacity used in Frankfurt owner is now 68%, and that's only due to communication. So I think there is the main game, and maybe find one language. I don't know, like in the aeroplane business, everybody talks English. Why is that not possible in the rail business? Why is every country has its own language? I think it's old-fashioned and should change, but that's not.
Well, is maybe something that where you as the railway office can play a role in these kind of procedures?
Yeah, generally the rail is old-fashioned comparing to the airport, to the airline and flight freight. I don't know if I'm heard.
I think it's where. Otherwise, what we also can do, but then that one should be off. Do we have sound? It's working?
It's
Good,
it's
good. Then
working.
please
Okay.
continue.
Okay, thank you. Okay. It's an idea. It's for us. We are collecting the issues and problems and analyzing the market. We don't only collect the statistical data from the rail operators, from the market players, but we also ask them about the problems. And the problem of language is not only one problem on the rail lines. We are analyzing them. Mm-hmm. We are publishing reports on it.
But do you then have like direct communications? Do you then meet with rail operators, or is it mainly that you? Because indeed, the idea of a working group, is that something that's interesting for you as well, to set up such a thing that Roland introduced for how they're dealing with it in the Netherlands?
Of course, this problem with communication, that I think it's easy to solve problem. It's an issue of the infrastructure managers generally, and our role of UTK is coordination, probably with a regulator of railways in Germany. We have direct contacts with them, and we can start such a task force.
Yeah, task force
on it, and try to solve it. It's many such problems is solved like that. So I'm just here listening and taking notes to take the ideas, to come to my bosses and try to talk and fix it.
Yeah, well, that's, ladies and gentlemen, that's already a very concrete possible sidestep. So much to discuss also later on. But for now, Marjorie, do we see any maybe suggestions on what else can be done in the short term to improve it? Yeah, I see a hand in the back. I will go over there. There you go.
Chris Acosta from Pino Very Masters. I think everybody agree on the goal we have with these longer trains. And I just heard from Roland that is very interested that the limitation in Frankfurt-Oder, there is not. Because it's possible, technical, to run till Frankfurt-Oder 740 meters. Yeah. So we have to look, if we want to make a quick win, do we have a technical limitation from Frankfurt-Oder into Poland, or have we a virtual problem? So everything on paper is limited to 630, but in practice we are able to come to a longer length. Maybe not 740 or 50 at this stage, but we have to try and seek the longest possible at this moment. And I think that's something very easy to look and achieve.
I think you can answer that question. Is it a virtual problem?
Now it's like I mentioned, from the Netherlands we already are running 740 meter trains to somewhere near Mannheim in Germany. In Holland at the borders we have the capacity. In Frankfurt-Oder there is the capacity. And along the track in Germany it's also the capacity. There's something is blocking this opportunity to get the model shift, because it has a very big impact on the cost of a train. I think if we would realize 740 meters train, the model shift will be easily realized, because now we are fighting with trucks, and now we have almost the same price as trucks. But if we can carry 640, including lock now, so in reality you can only carry 621 meters. And if you then get to 700 meters, the cost will go down, and then I think you will get the shift to model shift that everybody goes on the train. And it's also due to the new regulation of with the trucks, the mobility package which is in place now. So in the future, it will be much more difficult to have trucks from other countries staying a long time in Europe. So I think the opportunities are there, but I don't know how we can change that everybody agrees on the 740 meters, because the infrastructure is there, but it doesn't happen.
I just want to go back to something that Mr. Stefanski said. He said, why do we not just charge by the speed of the train? So when the train is speeding less than 40 kilometers per hour, it should be free. How is that for an idea? Does anybody disagree?
Is there anybody here from an infrastructure manager?
It's true that freight trains are on the fourth row of snow taking off, which Dariusz mentioned. I quite often had a situation that my train, typical freight train with the bulk cargo, was put aside due to the passenger trains. So always the answer was passenger as priority. So maybe separation of the traffic between the passenger trains and the freight trains, or promoting the freight trains passage during the night would be the solution. There are two positive aspects of that. First of all, we move the freight during the night between the terminals, so the trains can reach the next terminal in the morning, and then the deliveries to the final recipients can start as from the morning. And then in the night, these trains should have kind of priority, the freight trains, comparing to passenger trains. Secondly, second important thing as regards the infrastructure investment, which you mentioned, some billions invested by EU. By the way, Poland is also part of EU, so we also invest. There's one mistake. These new modern rail trucks, they doesn't have the so-called overlapping or overpassing trucks. They are being cut off because the main track is most important. Must be top speed, full train going from A to B. But what happens when the freight trains arrives? The freight trains must stay few hundred kilometers away from the passenger trains running the main track, because on the way there is no overlapping track, or it was cut off by infrastructure authorities. So it could also help if in the investment for the future we consider these side tracks enabling freight trains to not to wait few hundred kilometers because the passenger train is coming. So let's say these two. But I also would like to tell something optimistic, because I can see a bit pessimistic things. If you look in the figures of the intermodal, it's yearly 10 or 7, 10, up to 10% increase. I wanted to ask colleagues from Holland, do you have such good figures as well, or so are you? Can you also confirm that intermodal is?
Yeah, there has been a big intermodal shift also in Holland, but I don't know the numbers. But it's not only by rail, but it's also a lot by barges in Holland, and that has to do in the fact that. That's also, we find the problem in Holland is that the waterways, which also needs a lot of investment in locks and in harbors, that's free of charge. So everybody can use the waterways free of charge, but if you use the rail, you have to pay a lot of money. And I think that's also a not fair way of working to work with those two modalities. But there is a lot of model shift in Holland, yeah.
Concerning the waterways, in Poland we have no waterways actually, which could be the opportunity for the rail. I represent Contargo. We have 24 terminals on the Rhine River in Germany and Holland, but in Poland, of course, it's no case. So the rail is the natural solution, and I think it will happen sooner or later, and it's happening. As I said, this intermodal is every year increasing thanks to, of course, efforts of you, Darek, and the other companies which are struggling with our obstacles. But in general, I can see some optimism.
Okay, we have two questions from the online audience, and I'd like to give that a chance too. So we have a question from Stefan Kurch, and he's saying, Road is working on platooning, e-trucks, self-driving cars, and we are discussing language problems and still the same interoperability issues. Isn't that embarrassing for rail? It's more of a statement, but
yeah, that's really embarrassing. I can give another item which is still embarrassing in rail. If, for instance, a train leaves in Tilburg towards the German border, and every log driver has to know the track. He has to pass an exam for that track. He has to drive that track every year a few times. That's also in Germany, I believe. Poland, I don't know. So if there is something happening and the train should drive via Utrecht, then you have to change the log driver because that log driver didn't know the track via Utrecht. So I say, why don't we have something like TomTom or something like that also in the rail? That every log driver can run every rail part all over Europe, but that's not normal. So everybody needs to know the track. Everybody needs to speak the language. So it's we need new investments or new ideas about how to improve rail and how to use it better.
Okay.
Another question from George Raymond. Why aren't the fast-growing rail volumes from China creating more pressure for faster improvements in Poland and the rest of the EU? So actually, the EU is investing a lot, and we all are helped by that, and not only in the EU, but also China. Why is that not creating more pressure? Anybody has an idea? Yes, I'm sorry.
Mr. Stefanski.
All these sources, yes.
Yes, I do have, if I may say something, hello again.
Hi.
I think that's one biggest problem. And all the problems we are discussing today and also on the previous conferences and most likely on the next 10 we will discuss exactly the same subjects. Question is how to motivate the infrastructure managers to start treat us as their clients. Because right now, we are discussing about the problems which are really related to the infrastructure managers. The infrastructure manager who should be interested how to drive my train faster, how to avoid any kind of the bottlenecks at the border. But we are coming to the solutions with the proposals, and we are discussing all those subjects among ourselves. Is there someone from the infrastructure managers who is listening to that and is saying, yes, tomorrow I will solve your problems? Or we are just discussing again, we are putting our wish list on the table, but infrastructure manager is not interested in running more trains with higher speed with lower costs.
Is there someone from the infrastructure manager? Because I think it's a very valid point. Is there somebody from an infrastructure who is willing to take the stage? Because it would be an opportunity also to have maybe the last words before the break. But so far, now Mr. Stefanski, I don't know. I hope somebody in the live stream is working at an infrastructure manager and is listening to the quite positive and good ideas that we have heard. And I'm now looking at my co-moderator.
Yes, and
are we wrapping up?
We are almost wrapping up. There is one last question from the online audience. And this is Leontine Vreke, and she's asking, which role do you see for IT when it comes to intermodality and the process of logistics? And maybe, Jana, you could reply to that question. Do you? Yes. Which role do you see for IT?
Okay, so this role of IT is really very important today. Of course, of different digital solutions, because we can spend a lot of money to the physical, to the transport infrastructure, but sometimes we can solve some problems by digital solutions and to receive a lot of advantages here, and time saving. Time saving is crucial there.
Yeah. So this could actually make that significant change that you were talking about.
Yes, but again, we are discussing about some quite easy solutions in rail transport for that. Since my
Rival University from study. It's known. Today we have more and more different solutions and technologies available. However, a progress in this case also not very good today.
Okay, well then I would like to suggest that we include that in our program next year. We can see what IT can mean for the sector. And we have to wrap it up now because otherwise we don't have coffee. Thank you very much for all being here. After the coffee break, we're going to continue. The coffee break is offered to you by Metrans. So I'd like to invite you all to enjoy this very much.
Thank you.